Welcome to another Ocean Ideas Talk, brought to you by Ocean Lovers.
Please help me welcome Professor David Booth as he joins us for a solo talk about how artificial fish pods and new coral habitats can boost fish biodiversity in Sydney. Professor David Booth is a professor of marine ecology at UTS and a research associate at Sydney Institute of Marine Science, or SIMS. He has published over 200 papers in reef fish ecology, climate change, and other anthropogenic impacts on fishes and fisheries in the Caribbean, Hawaii, Great Barrier Reef, New South Wales coast, and studies how tropical fish travel down the East Australian current past Sydney under climate change. Over to you, David.
Thank you very much. Before I get started, I should just say that I'm so impressed with this festival. I've been involved since the first time, I think it was 4 years ago, and I've just seen it really grow, and this year it really seems to have hit its strap, and the weather helps too. So I have a career spanning 4.5 decades now in research, and really the basic theme is to understand what fish want. And it's a complex question, and if you think about it, the main thing that fish want is water, correct? So us in our lab, some of whom are here, have been studying the interaction between things like water temperature and salinity and how it affects fish. So I'm not going to talk about that today. Ingredient number 2 is habitat. How many people fish here? When you're going to find a fishing spot, you don't just do it randomly. You usually find a headland or a reef or a breakwall or something. And that's a bit of a cue because generally fish like habitat, hard substrate that has shelter. And they use that shelter to hide in from predators, or if you're a predator, to hide in to get your prey. So habitat, hard rocky habitat, is very important and harbours a lot of fish biodiversity. So today I'm just going to tell you 2 very short tales about new habitat and when it comes, what are the pluses and minuses. So I guess tale number 1 involves Sydney Harbour, and we're very proud of Sydney Harbour. We spruik it around the world as an urban harbour that has habitat. And it has, in our world, over 620 species of fish have been recorded by us and the Australian Museum and others now. Now that compares favourably with New Zealand, about 400. The entire coast of Europe, 325. So we've won in that sense. And the reason is it's in a position where there's partly tropical, partly temperate, and also all the habitats, the seagrass, the rocky reefs, the mangroves and things like that. But in Sydney Harbour, over the last, probably 200 years, we've seen an increase in the built environment, the amount of habitat in the harbour that's caused by us. So that includes things like seawalls, things like docks and wharves and things like that. Now these basically often take away habitat. I mean, Farm Cove, right at Botanic Gardens there, used to be a mangrove swamp with salt marsh. It's now got a lovely concrete wall around it. Now there's still some habitat there, but most of it's gone. We have done a fair bit of work in this area of artificial reefs, including everything from oil rigs offshore and their costs and benefits to some smaller studies, smaller but important studies. So about 218, we started working with the Sydney Opera House, which is a wonderful place to work, wonderful people. And Utzon, who designed the Opera House, was very much interested in everything above water. He will not let a plant grow there. So even today, you won't see shrubbery around the Opera House. But a poll was done by the Opera House workers, and they decided they were interested in that marine environment. It's stuck right out there in the harbour. What have they done to it, and how can they help? So we did some initial surveys, and around the Opera House, it's actually quite interesting. On the Circular Quay side, there's the Eastern Broadwalk when you walk around that side of the Opera House. Underneath there is an amazing rocky reef, and we're allowed in there under the Opera House. It's quite exciting. And they turn the lights on, and it's another world. And what it is, it's the rocky seashore coming up to the surface. And in those rocks, there's all sorts of fish. No algae, no kelp, because there's no light when they turn the lights off. But on the other side, on the Eastern Broadwalk and Man of War Steps, if you know that area, It's like your Pebble Creek driveway plunging down into the sea. There's no habitat. There's a bit of rocky reef, a bit of kelp, but really pretty depauperate fish-wise. So we designed, with the help of Alex Goad of Reef Designs Lab in Melbourne, some very small reef units. And if you Google Opera House and fish, you can read all about it. There's all sorts of media. Because it's the Opera House, lots of media. And we installed these in 2019 after a huge legislative battle. So what Alex was saying in the previous talk, legislation is one of our biggest hampers to doing good work in the ocean. We put these small reef units in there and then started surveying them and other areas around. And lo and behold, the fish came. About 8 or 9 species of fish, an octopus we hadn't seen before, were popped in there. Now, and recently we've even seen an endangered white seahorse or 3 on those. So that has evolved into a project Restore with the Sydney Institute of Marine Science, where we're putting similar reef units, and there's some parked out on the apron out there, some of these concrete structures in areas around the harbour that have degraded. We've lost the complexity of the rocky reef habitat. So we'll see what happens. Number 2, in about 2016, I was made aware of a new coral arriving in Sydney, a tropical, semi-tropical coral, Poeciloperid coral, a small branching coral, arriving in Sydney and spreading. Now that has spread now to a huge area of quite a few hectares around the outer Sydney harbour and the ocean around Manly. Now, we've been studying this and the fish, I'm a fish person, over those years, and we've found many, many species of temperate fish, locals, are using the habitat because there isn't much other shelter around there, but a suite of new tropicals. And in our 28-year study of tropical fish coming into Sydney, we've seen about 5 or 6 new fish species, some interesting crabs, arriving on that coral. So in the one sense, it's very exciting to see this spreading and all these new fish, but then you take pause and think, this ain't natural. This is a climate change factor, warming waters, and at the flip side, we're losing kelp, we're losing seagrass, and we're losing temperate fish habitat, and they are disappearing. These fish are often the fish we put on the table. So there's 2 examples of habitat coming and going, new habitat, and you just have to take pause and make sure what you're looking at is a net benefit. And so the corals coming down the coast, while pretty exciting to us and a great research topic, really brings home the fact that we do have climate change in our waters, and it's really accelerating. I don't know what my time is there. Is that about right? 2 is in 2 minutes. I thought I saw someone there going, stop. Maybe that's just what I was saying. So having said that, you've probably heard of offshore reefs being dumped for fishing and that sort of thing. I call that a transformation. They're transforming natural habitat, could have been muddy, sandy bottom or whatever, into something fit for humans to fish from. What we're trying to stick with are what I call restoration. So we're restoring degraded habitat. And so, as you can probably guess, I'm a bit of a conscious objector to popping in these large reefs in offshore natural locations. There's a claim that it helps nature because there's more fish, but really is that what we're after? I say we preserve nature and stick to areas that are already degraded, like places in Sydney Harbour that we're trying to restore. All right, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Ocean Ideas. Please make sure to share it with your networks and help us in our mission to turn ripples of action into waves of change for our blue planet.